Hey everybody, Stinky here. This guide is the ultimate guide to Affliction Warlock PvP. This is everything you need to know to jump into an arena, a Battleground Blitz, a solo shuffle, and just start dominating your opponents with overwhelming amounts of damage and tons of pressure through your damage over time spells, dots, and Haunt Shadowbolt combos that you use to finish off your enemies. Here's a video outline. You can use the timestamps in the video description to skip around. Here's what we'll cover. Why play Affliction? You've probably seen Affliction locks out there and you're like, what? They do so much damage. I want to join their forces. That's why you do it. It's a lot of fun. You do a lot of damage, a lot of pressure that way. The class fantasy is a ton of fun. Shadow spells, haunt spells, you're rotting down the enemy teams. It's super fun. Second, we'll go over gearing. Everything you need to know. All the stats you need to prioritize, the tier pieces, crafted pieces, gems, and enchants. Third, talent points. Hero talents, Affliction talents, Warlock talents, and PvP talents. And fourth, we'll go over rotations. Your opener, what you cast when you enter an arena or a blitz. Second, your standard rotation when you're in between your big cooldowns. And third, your burst rotation when you're trying to finish somebody off. Finally, I'll touch on some playstyle notes because there are a couple different ways you can play the match depending on who you're facing, what your own playstyle is, just some thoughts on what you can do to maximize your potential as an Affliction lock. First, some quick notes about me. I'm a long-time Affliction lock. I've been playing Affliction ever since the Burning Crusade in PvP. It was a very different spec at the time. Siphon Life, Soul Link, very tanky. These days it's a totally different playstyle, but still a ton of fun. I've gotten Gladiator many times. I do a ton of solo content, solo shuffle. I'm currently 2700-ish. I do play all three Warlock specs at a high rating in solo shuffle and blitz and arena. And I just started making content, so videos and streams and guides and replays with commentary. Do check out some of my stuff on my channel, youtube.com/@smellystinky and twitch.tv/smellystinky. I'm doing a lot of streaming, trying to teach, trying to encourage people to play Warlock because it's a ton of fun these days. If you like what you see, go ahead and drop by my stream. Leave a comment here. Let me know what you like, what you don't like. Happy to answer any questions. Looking forward to hearing more from you as I continue to make more content. Why play Affliction? Well, this is core class fantasy. This is what a Warlock is all about. You corrupt people. You make them feel agony. You exhaust them. You tongue them? I don't know. What really matters is that you make a lot of enemies as an Affliction Warlock. That's what you do best, and that's what Gul'dan did. That's what he taught us. Make enemies. I'm not a lore expert to be honest, but I do recall he had a lot of enemies. And it simply feels awesome to have damage rolling on multiple targets, knowing that they're all rotting away, you're pressuring the enemy team, and they are always susceptible to being blown up by you at some point with your damage combo, because your burst window is extremely strong as an Affliction Warlock. Affliction also excels at Battleground Blitz. It's a really fun game mode, lots of targets you can dot, you can have a huge impact in a large team fight, a lot of fun. Granted, Affliction is a little bit harder to learn and play than most other caster classes. You will get attacked a lot. You'll be under a lot of pressure, a lot of people trying to kick and interrupt you, try and mess up your damage rotations. But with a little practice, you can get better. You can figure out how to apply damage using instant casts and to keep doing your thing even when melee and hunters are chasing after you. There is no better feeling than dominating a lobby that you're supposed to lose because everyone is supposed to shut you down, and you still top the damage meter, you still get all the kills. Extremely rewarding, extremely satisfying. Do check out this replay I've put together with some commentary. It's a Affliction versus triple melee high-rated solo shuffle lobby. It is possible to beat those melee, beat those hunters in a solo shuffle lobby. Let's talk about gearing. First thing you need to know, item level is the most important thing. So you want to be chasing the higher item level gear in PvP. This means that in terms of gearing, you will progress from crafted gear, you can buy it on the auction house, up to honor level gear. You buy with honor that you get from doing battlegrounds and other PvP. And then you want to get bloody token gear, which you get from doing war mode stuff. There's a quest giver in Dornagal. He will give you more bloody tokens. And then you want to get Conquest level gear. This is the end game PvP gear. Conquest gear you buy from the PvP vendor. Some of it you'll craft. We'll talk about it in a second. I'm recording this guide during the War Within Season 2 after the Turbo Boost event. So the highest item level you can get to is 684. So you want to get all your gear that scales up to 684 in PvP. If you're watching this in a later season, don't worry about it. You'll have the same progression in terms of gearing. You'll still want to get to conquest level gear as much as possible. It'll have a different item level, but it'll still be the capped item level highest you can get in PvP. Item level matters because it gives you the two most important stats in PvP, which are intellect, your main stat, that scales all your damage abilities, and stamina, which scales your health, which is super important. You want to have as much health as possible. The other stats you want to focus on in PvP as an Affliction Lock are versatility and haste. These are the most important secondary stats for you. Versatility makes you tankier and do more damage. It's a really nice stat in PvP. You want to have this as high as possible, especially as an Affliction Lock when you're getting attacked all the time. It'll make your healer's life a lot easier. In general, you want to aim for around 30% versatility or higher. I run basically max versatility. I think it's a really good stat. The next stat you focus on is haste. Haste makes you cast faster, which is really important because then you get to get more casts out, you can get your fears out, you can get your dots out a lot quicker. It also makes your dots tick faster, which is really important because you get these random procs when your dots tick. You get Nightfall procs, you get Soul Shard generation. Very important to have high haste. I aim for around 30% or higher. I think it's really important to have at least 25 to 30% haste. The other two stats, Mastery and Critical Strike, are pretty good, but they're just not as good as haste and versatility, so you're really not going to focus on them at all. You can try a heavy Mastery build, it'll make your dots tick a lot harder, but personally I find that the haste versatility focused build is just much more effective in general. In terms of where you get your gear, there's three sources. You get your PvP gear. You just get it straight from the vendor. It works perfectly well right out of the box, no fine tuning needed. You just buy it for conquest points and you'll be pretty well geared just from that. The second source of gear is from crafting. You need to craft at least 2 pieces. You can craft more pieces if you like because you can fine tune the stats on them, but you really just need 2 pieces because you need what are called embellishments. You need these 2 embellishments. They're called Elemental Focusing Lens. They will give you an extra damage proc every now and then. It's totally passive, but it's a lot of damage. You can craft them on any piece. I would craft at least one of them on a ring because you can get haste and versatility on that ring, and you can only buy 1 haste versatility ring from the PvP vendor. So you want to fill that second ring slot with another haste versatility ring if possible. You can get your other embellishment effect on any other piece, wrist, back, whatever you want. I just have them here on the wrist and the ring. The third source of gear you need is the tier set. Really important to have this. It's very strong this season for Affliction Locks. The 4 set bonus will give you an extra unstable affliction proc every now and then. It's really powerful to get unstable affliction rolling on multiple targets using this proc. You get tier pieces that scale up in PvP by buying PvP gear from the vendor and then taking it over to the Catalyst in Dornigal and converting it into a tier piece. I recommend getting the helm, shoulders, chest, and gloves. The legs are not very well itemized for Affliction Locks, so you will skip those and buy PvP gear instead. Something worth mentioning is you don't need any PvE gear to do PvP properly. This includes trinkets. Even if you can find a really great trinket from Mythic Rating or Mythic Plus, they're never going to be worth using in PvP because the trinkets that you buy from the PvP vendor in Dornigal, they have a set bonus. Extra stamina, extra intellect. You're always going to use those 2 PvP trinkets. Plus, you'll generally always need the effect that you get from the medallion, which breaks crowd control on a 2-minute cooldown. Really important to use that very smartly in PvP, either defensively or offensively. Gems and enchants. So first gem you need is Cognitive Bloodstone. This is super important. You cannot play PvP without this as a caster. This gives you precognition, precog, super important proc. What happens is if you start casting something and then you fake cast and then somebody uses an interrupt on you, like pummel, kick, spell lock, counterspell, anything like that, and they don't interrupt a spell because you fake casted it, then you get a 4-second buff. It's a 4-second immunity to all crowd control and other interrupts. This proc can swing the tides of battle. It's super important to get this as much as possible. You can cast Soul Rot, Malefic Rapture, Fear, Haunt, Shadowbolt, anything you want to do. You have free reign to cast it during precog. So this gem, you absolutely need this for PvP. Other gems you can fill with any stats that you prefer. I get versatility haste gems, quick sapphires, emeralds, versatile emeralds also work well too. Anything you want, it doesn't really matter too much. To get sockets though for your PvP gear, you need to buy them from the honor vendor. They sell them for a ton of honor and vicious bloodstones. It's kind of expensive, it takes a long time to grind the honor, but you need to get at least one for the cognitive bloodstone, and the other sockets you can get over time as you play. You don't have to wait for them to queue up. It's not a huge difference. In terms of enchants, you get the helm enchant from Corruptions at the Horrific Visions event. You can start it in Dornagal. It takes a few hours, so it's not super important. It probably adds 1 or 2% to your damage. It may be worth it to you, maybe not, depending on how much time you have, but I would get the Greater Void Ritual. It's a proc, it'll give you a little bit more stats. It's totally passive. The other options are Twisted Appendage or Gushing Wounds. They'll add a little bit of damage to your rotation, not huge. For your back enchant, you want Chant of Leeching Fangs. The important part of this is not just the leech stat that it gives you, which gives you a little bit of health when you're playing, not a large amount. The important aspect of that enchant is the out of combat regeneration. So when you're playing something like Battleground Blitz and you're in between fights, you'll regenerate your health faster. It makes a pretty big difference in Blitz. Chest enchant, you want Crystal and Radiance. This gives you main stat, just a little bit extra damage. Wrist, you can get either speed if you're good at kiting. I'm not good at kiting, so I get leech. Leech just gives me a little bit of extra health when I'm fighting. Both are perfectly fine. Speed is probably a little bit better if you do a lot of blitz. Legs, you want to get the spell thread that gives you intellect and stamina. Boots, you want to get Defender's March, which gives you stamina. Rings, you want to get either Radiant Haste or Radiant Versatility. I opt for Versatility. I think it makes me a little bit tankier. Just pick whichever you prefer. The weapon chant, you want to get Authority of Radiant Power, which will give you a huge damage proc and intellect proc. You can try Authority of the Depths, which gives you a little extra damage, but in my testing I've found that Radiant Power generally works out better. Now for hero talents, there's Hellcaller and Soul Harvester. Hellcaller is pretty fun, and if you do a lot of PvE, you're probably used to using it. It turns your corruption into Wither, it does a lot more dot damage, it has a really nice cooldown called Malevolence. However, in PvP, Soul Harvester is generally stronger in basically every situation. The reason Soul Harvester is simply better is that it does just as much spread damage, so a lot of rot damage through dots, but most importantly, you have a lot more single target burst capability. A lot of your kills will come with a Haunt Shadowbolt combo, which you only get as Soul Harvester. So whether you do a lot of 2v2, 3v3, solo shuffle, blitz, world PvP, you're always going to be Soul Harvester. The Soul Harvester hero talent nodes are pretty self-explanatory. The main thing you want to pay attention to is that you get Nightfall procs from Haunt with this Satael's Volition talent point, and then you see that Nightfall through Quietus and Wicked Reaping grant you a lot of extra damage procs as well. This means that a lot of damage is loaded into your Haunt Shadowbolt combo. The other thing you need to notice is the Shadow of Death talent point here at the end. This gives you 3 soul shards that are very powerful when you cast Soul Rot. They do extra damage, and you need those shards in order to do your damage combo with Malefic Rapture as well. In terms of your choice nodes, I always grab Friends in Dark Places, which makes your defensive cooldown Dark Pact a little stronger. Shared Fate is another extra passive effect. It's just another dot, does more damage over time. And Eternal Servitude can be helpful when you need to get your pet out again if it's being targeted and killed frequently. For the Warlock talent points, you want to get Fell Domination. You'll generally want to run with a pet as an Affliction lock because you get a lot of utility, it dispels, it makes you tankier, it does a little bit of damage, and it increases your damage by quite a lot. So you generally want the pet. Fell Domination will help you get a second pet if your first pet dies. Soul Leech makes you tankier, gives you some healing, gives you a bit of a shield. It's totally passive, you don't think about it. Burning Rush, really critical in Blitz. You need this to get around because you don't have much mobility as a Warlock. You will not need this in Arena or Solo Shuffle where it's a smaller map, but in Blitz, it's critical. Fell Pact is a talent I'll sometimes take if I know that the enemy team is going to be targeting my pet quite a lot, but usually it's something I skip. Demon Skin and Fell Armor, you don't really need to know much about them. They're passive, but they make you a little bit tankier, which is super important when you're getting attacked quite a lot. Fiendish Stride, this buffs Burning Rush. You need this in Blitz, really critical. You can skip it sometimes if you want an extra talent point to throw somewhere else, but I usually take this in Blitz. Curses of Enfeeblement are very important for Affliction Warlocks. You're going to be cursing all the time using the Jinx talent. I'll show you that later. Really important. You need this. You'll be using all of these curses frequently in Arena and in Blitz. Demonic Circle is a must-have as a Warlock. You need this to get around. Very important to kite melee. The next choice node is Mortal Coil or Howl of Terror. You can take Howl of Terror if you really think that you need AoE Fear for melee, but generally speaking, Mortal Coil is very strong. I use this to kill people quite a lot, and the healing you get from Mortal Coil is actually pretty good too. Amplify Curse is an underrated node. This is really strong. You pair it with Curse of Weakness to prevent a target from being able to crit. That really slows down Hunter and melee damage. And you want to pair it with Exhaustion, really slows down your target. Curse of Tongues makes them cast really slow, really great on healers and casters. There's a whole bunch of nodes here I'll just hover over very briefly, but generally speaking, you don't need to know much about them other than they make you a little bit tankier and you need to take them in order to access nodes below. Abyss Walker works with Demonic Circle Teleport. Whenever you teleport, you get this buff that makes you tankier. You take 8% less damage. It says 4 here, but in an arena or in Blitz, it actually is 8%. Really strong cooldown. You want to have this buff up as much as possible. Banish is the spell you can use against other warlocks. I don't think it's really that important. I basically forget to take it every time. Teachings of the Satyr. This will make your Amplified Curse up a lot more. It's actually pretty strong. I do take this when I'm facing a team that I know does not have very much Curse Dispel, and I will get a lot of value out of my Amplified Curse. Accrued Vitality. This is pretty terrible. Drain Life got nerfed a long time ago. Sometimes I cast it because I have nothing else to do and I'm bored, and it's actually a total waste of time. You're probably better off with like First Aid or something. Sweet Souls, you need it to get past it, and it's also pretty decent. It makes your health stone a little stronger. The next choice node is Nightmare or Horrify. Horrify is really just a PvE thing. You'll never take that. You actually want things to run away from you when you fear them. Nightmare makes your fear a little bit better. It won't break quite as often to damage. So this is actually pretty nice. I take it sometimes depending on the comp I'm facing, but generally speaking, it's not a critical node for an Affliction Warlock. Demonic Gateway is one of your strong mobility tools. Your whole party can use it. This is really powerful. Very important to learn to use this properly. Lifeblood, you just simply can't afford this point in any build for Affliction Lock. Now Dark Pact is, I mentioned it before, Dark Pact is one of your really important defensive cooldowns. You're using this quite often. You will use Dark Pact early and often. Your other defensive cooldown is Unending Resolve, which you will use as a last resort. This is a longer cooldown, really powerful because it prevents you from being interrupted, so you can actually cast a lot of stuff while you use it. So sometimes I'll even use an Unending Resolve offensively, but it is your major wall. Strength of Will makes it much stronger, and this is your last resort, so this is a really good talent point. Sometimes in Blitz, if I know I'll be fighting very frequently, I'll take Dark Accord. That's actually pretty strong in Blitz, but in Arena and Solo Shuffle, I always get Strength of Will. Shadow Fury is one of your few AoE CC abilities. You need this. It's an AoE stun. You'll use this quite often. The next choice node is Frequent Donor or Ichor of Devils. You'll usually take Frequent Donor because you want to use Dark Pact early and often. Ichor of Devils, I'll take it sometimes in Blitz if I know that I'm not going to be fighting that often or I won't be using Dark Pact that often. It'll just save me a little bit of health, but Frequent Donor is probably the way to go. Next are some damage talents. Socrathor's Guile. This is really good because it improves your agony damage, and agony is a large source of your dot damage. However, I often skip it because it's not easy to afford with most of my PvP talent builds, and I'll usually instead get Sargerai Technique, which increases your Shadow Bolt damage, very important for landing a kill as an Affliction Lock. Next few talent points, you just take what you can afford. You can't get Shadow Flame or Dark Fury, they're just too expensive. Same with Swift Artifice, you can't afford it. Demonic Tactics, you need this to access other stuff. It's just increases your damage. Teachings of the Black Harvest is actually very good with your Fell Hunter. So your Fell Hunter will dispel stuff, dispel magic, and that's actually very powerful. Offensive dispels are very strong in PvP, and you want to use that as often as possible. Resolute Barrier, it's a nice talent point, but you usually can't afford it. Fell Synergy, again, it's not that great, but it gives you access to a really important talent point below, and that's Pact of Gluttony, which makes your health stones usable more often in combat. This is really important. One of your few defensive cooldowns that you're going to use early and often along with Dark Pact. Soul Link, this makes you tankier. You'll always take this. Demonic Resilience, I think, is an underrated talent. I usually try and get this if I can afford it as an Affliction Lock. It makes you a little tankier, and it makes your pet a little less susceptible to dying, because your pet will die a lot. It's just AoE damage, even if it's not being focused down. Soul Conduit, this is a nice talent point because it'll increase the damage, especially if you proc it during your big rotation with Malefic Raptures. It'll increase your damage by quite a lot. However, it's more of a nice to have than a need to have, so afford it if you can. The last talent point in your Warlock tree is a need to have. You do need Soulburn. Soulburn will make your health stone so much stronger. It's a really, really powerful heal with Soulburn. You pair it with Demonic Gateway to lay your gateway instantly. That's also very important. You pair it with Health Funnel to heal your pet up really quickly, and you always pair it with Demonic Circle Teleport to give yourself a little bit of a speed boost after you teleport. You'll notice that there's quite a few options here between some of the choice nodes and some of the playstyles. You can buff up your pet, make it a little tankier, or you can take some more damage nodes with Agony. So there's some optionality here based on what your playstyle is, how you want to approach being an Affliction Log, and also what the matchup is and where you are, whether you're in a Blitz or an Arena. I'll include a few build codes in the video description. Try them out, see which one you like best. What you see here is the build that I use most often in Arena and Solo Shuffle, but I tweak a lot of points depending on the situation. If you watch my stream, you'll see me change up my build very, very frequently. If you really want to dig in deep, you can join my Discord. Just go to twitch.tv/smellystinky and type !Discord, and you'll get a link to my Discord. You can join, it's totally free. You can find more build codes there. Try them all out. Get creative, make your own. For the Affliction tree, this is generally what you'll be playing in most PvP situations. There are a few nodes I'll highlight that you can change based on what your situation is and what your playstyle is, but for the most part, this is generally what you'll be playing in any Arena, Blitz, or Shuffle. First node is Unstable Affliction. This is one of your core 3 dots that you need to maintain high uptime on whenever you PvP. Unstable Affliction, you have to hardcast it, but it is a very powerful dot. It does a lot of damage, and if it gets dispelled by the enemy team, the enemy dispeller gets silenced and takes backlash damage, around 4 million damage. So it's quite significant. Writhe and Agony increases your Agony damage, and Agony is the second dot that you need to maintain high uptime on in any PvP situation. This one you maintain on as many targets as possible. Agony does a lot of damage, and importantly, it generates shards for you as it ticks. Seed of Corruption is kind of a useless talent in PvP. I basically never cast this. You could cast it in an AoE setting in Blitz if there's a huge team fight, but generally speaking, you're not really going to be casting this. You just need this to access the nodes below. Dark Virtuosity increases your Shadow Bolt damage, so that's very nice, but it's hard to afford 2 points in there. I usually just stick 1 in there. You can't really take another point out of anywhere else. The next node, Absolute Corruption. This increases your Corruption damage, and Corruption is the third of the 3 important dots that you want to maintain high uptime on, and this one also, like Agony, will on as many targets as possible. The other option in this flex node is Siphon Life, which increases the healing that you do and the damage that you do with Corruption, but it's not a huge difference. I don't think it's actually worth taking. Generally speaking, you're going to want to go with Absolute Corruption simply because it makes it easier to maintain high uptime on Corruption. Kindled Malice, this is just a damage node. This increases your damage, very important, and it also gives you access to important nodes below it. Nightfall gives you instant cast Shadow Bolts, which is a huge part of your damage rotation in general and also part of your burst rotation. You really need this node, and you play around their Nightfall procs quite a lot. Volatile Agony is a nice damage node. It is pretty good if you can afford it, but it's really hard to fit into this build. The next is a choice node, and you basically have to go with Improved Shadow Bolt because of the way your tier set works. I actually really like the Drain Soul playstyle. I do miss it, but the way the tier set works is that it procs additional unstable afflictions, but only with your Shadow Bolt, so you have to go with Improved Shadow Bolt, which also does a ton of damage in Soul Harvester. The next is a choice node between Summoner's Embrace and Grimoire Sacrifice. If you don't like managing a pet and you just want to focus on your own character, you can sacrifice your pet using Grimoire. Totally legit. It does decent damage when it procs, and it also gives you some of the utility of having a pet. You get the spell lock from your Fell Hunter that you otherwise would have. However, Summoner's Embrace is better in most situations because the damage that you get from that node is much higher than you get from Grimoire of Sacrifice, and there's more utility and more tankiness from having a pet. So generally speaking, you're going to be better off with Summoner's Embrace and a pet. However, there are some situations where, for example, in a large team fight in Blitz or in some matchups in Solo Shuffle where your pet will die a lot, you can go with Sacrifice instead there. The next is a choice node between Phantom Singularity and Vile Taint. In PvP, Phantom Singularity simply is better. It's an instant cast, it can't be interrupted, and it does a ton of damage. Vile Taint does a lot of damage, but so does Phantom Singularity, and it's much easier to get out. Haunt is a really great spell. This is going to buff your damage on a single target, and it does quite a lot of damage itself. So this is going to be part of your burst rotation and part of your regular rotation. It's up quite a lot. You definitely want to get this node. Shadow Embrace is another passive node. This will just increase the damage you do to targets. You generally will have high uptime on this just from your Nightfall procs because you'll cast Shadow Bolt with it instantly. It'll apply Shadow Embrace, so will Haunt, and you don't really need to worry about it too much. Summon Darkglare is a critical part of your damage rotation, especially your burst rotation. You're going to get a lot of kills soon after you get your Darkglare out. He does a lot of damage, but he also extends the duration of your existing dots, including really important ones like Soul Rot, you'll see down below. Cunning Cruelty, great node. I sometimes take this because it does add to your burst damage because it'll proc off of your Nightfall Shadow Bolts. However, it is hard to afford in a lot of builds, so sometimes I skip it, like you see here. Infirmity is a critical node. You need this. It'll increase the damage you're doing to a target that has Phantom Singularity, which is another dot that's extended by Darkglare. So it's a big part of your burst window. Improved Haunt, you need this in order to reliably get Haunt out because it shortens the cast time. Really important. Malediction and Contagion are nodes that increase your dot damage, based on your critical strike. These are not the best nodes in PvP because critical strike is nerfed in PvP, so I generally skip these. Malevolent Visionary adds a lot of damage to your Dark Lair, which again is part of your burst rotation, really important node. Cull the Weak, Tormented Crescendo, Focus Malignancy, Improved Malefic Rapture, and Malefic Touch. These all increase your Malefic Rapture damage. Very important because Malefic Rapture is a huge part of your burst window that I'll show you later. Creeping Death and Xavius' Gambit are both high damage nodes. You really want to take these. And you want to take Soul Rot, Malign Omen, and Dark Harvest. These all load a ton of damage into your Soul Rot spell, which is a part of your burst window. And you want to take Withering Bolt because that increases your Shadow Bolt damage, huge part of your damage rotation as a Soul Harvester lock. There are a few other nodes here that you'll see that are pretty good, and I would take them if I could afford them, but they simply don't fit into most builds. Perpetual Instability, this is a pretty good node if you really have trouble getting your Unstable Affliction out, but because you're not hard casting Unstable Affliction all that often, I don't think it's worth it. Relinquished, Death's Embrace, and Ravenous Afflictions, these all add a little bit of damage to your rotations, but not huge, so I don't take them. And finally, Oblivion is a really cool spell in theory, but it doesn't scale that well with your damage, and it's a long channel, so it's pretty awkward to use in PvP. Next are PvP talents. There are a lot of good ones, but the biggest one you need is Jinx. Jinx lets you apply both Agony and Corruption every time you cast a curse. So Curse of Weakness, Curse of Exhaustion, Curse of Tongues. You're casting these curses a lot, and you're going to be applying dots for free. It saves you a few global cooldowns each time you do that. That's huge. Really, really important talent. You need to use this a lot when you're playing. The other two talents you take are a little bit more optional. You can go with whatever you feel like based on the situation and what your playstyle is. The ones I recommend the most are Rotten Decay. This will increase the uptime of your dots because you'll be shadow bolting and nightfall proccing haunting targets. It's basically a huge quality of life improvement. Nether Ward is a great talent. You can reflect spells that come at you. This is good against caster lobbies. I take this very frequently. I also use Soul Rip very frequently, especially into melee lobbies who are going to be around you. It'll decrease the damage they do for a brief period of time, so it adds to your defensiveness. And I use Impish Instincts every time I face any sort of heavy melee or hunter lobby where there's a lot of physical damage. This will let you teleport more frequently, which lets you keep your Abyss Walker buff up even more. Two more talents I take in Blitz sometimes are Gateway Mastery, which increases the frequency that you can take your gates and the distance they go. Really helpful on Temple of Kotmogu. And Shadow Rift. Shadow Rift is actually a pretty fun spell once you figure out how to use it. You can teleport your enemies onto your circle. This is helpful in certain maps like Battle for Gilneas or Eye of the Storm, where you need to move enemies around and make a creative play. The remaining PvP talents are generally pretty useless. Essence Drain. This used to be a really nice node back when Drain Life was a thing. It was really fun, but Drain Life has been nerfed in the War Within, so it's really never worth casting. Rampant Afflictions, it basically just nerfs your damage because the way your tier set works, you're going to get multiple UAs out anyway, so taking this node will simply reduce the damage you do, and you don't really want to be casting Unstable Affliction repeatedly. It takes up a lot of time. Bonds of Fel is a pretty wacky spell to have in the Affliction arsenal. I don't understand why it's here. It does not scale with your damage, not a good spell. Soul Swap is not a terrible spell, but I never take it because it seems like you get more utility out of the other options in your PvP talents. However, this can transfer some pretty important dots, like your Soul Rot, but since it costs a shard to apply, I find it better just to use Jinx instead. Finally, Bloodstones. This is a terrible talent. You'll never take this because your health stones are perfectly fine the way they are. Well, the demonic health stones are. You don't want to replace them with a haste buff because you would die a million times more often without the healing that you get from your demonic health stones. We're finally ready to talk about rotations. Rotations are the kinds of spells you need to cast in different situations. There are 3 basic rotations you need to be thinking about whenever you're playing any sort of PvP scenario. First, you need to have a strong opener. You need to hit the ground running so that you're applying damage right off the bat. You want to have your foot on the gas the entire time you're on the offense, so you want to have a strong opener every time. Second is your basic rotation, so you want to maintain uptime on your dots, apply damage, apply pressure, even outside of your burst windows. And third is your burst window. These are the spells you're going to cast in order to land a kill. So let's start with the opener. First thing you do when you enter the gates of any sort of arena, solo shuffle, or blitz, you lay a demonic circle teleport so that you can port back whenever you get into trouble, which will be frequently if you're playing a lock. And you want to lay a gateway as well, because you need a gateway to move around the map in order to get away from your opponents. You won't use it that often, but when you do, it's because you are in a ton of trouble without it. Then the first thing you do when you apply damage is you jinx your opponents. You cast a curse. Curse of weakness on melee and hunters, curse of exhaustion if you want to kite them, curse of tongues if they're a caster or a healer. You're going to use your first 3 shards on jinxes. Jinx is the best opener because you want to get your damage rolling immediately. You want to start generating shards with agony ticks. You want to start generating nightfall procs with corruption ticks, and it's not interruptible, so you can't get stopped, you can't get kicked, and you won't be stuck with a weak opener. So you want to start with jinxes, and then you cast Unstable Affliction, which is the third dot you want to maintain high uptime on, especially on your kill target. Then you follow up with Haunt and Shadow Bolt, which will apply 2 stacks of Shadow's Embrace on your target. Then you need to do one of 2 things. Either go into your standard rotation, refreshing dots, applying pressure through crowd control like Mortal Coil or Fears, or you need to go into your burst rotation, which I'll go over last. For your standard rotation, you're simply refreshing dots, trying to maintain uptime on Agony and Corruption as much as possible. If you have shards to spare, then you want to use Jinx to apply curses as well, or if you need to save your shards for a burst window, then you apply them manually, 1 Agony, 1 Corruption, refresh them as needed. You're also refreshing Haunt and Unstable Affliction whenever you can get a free cast off, and you're looking for opportunities to use crowd control to either slow the enemy's damage dealers down or slow the enemy's healer down so that he falls further behind while your dots are rotting away at their team. Your main crowd control: Fear, Spell Lock, Mortal Coil, and Shadow Fury. Those are the main things you need to use as much as possible. And finally, there's the burst window. Really simple. Before you go into the burst, you want to have as many dots active as you can on your opponents so you're not refreshing them during your burst. Then you apply Phantom Singularity, Soul Rot, Dark Glare. Make sure Dark Glare is the last thing you cast because it'll refresh the duration on all of your other dots, including Phantom Singularity and Soul Rot. Ideally, you get Soul Rot on multiple targets so that your Dark Harvest gives you a bigger buff. Not a huge deal though if you can only get it on 1 target. The really important thing with Soul Rot is that it generates 3 special shards that are called Succulent Shards. They're so succulent. They do tons of damage. Basically, you want to dump all your shards into Malefic Raptors, and you want to cast Haunt Shadow Bolt to do a ton of single target damage. Use all your Nightfall procs, cast more Shadow Bolts, more single target damage, more Malefic Raptors as you get more shards. Dump all of that, you'll do a bazillion damage if you have a lot of dots rolling on multiple targets, especially in a large team fight or in a very frenzied 3v3 situation. The thing about this burst combo is it's very reliant on Dark Glare. Dark Glare extends a lot of your dots, it does a ton of damage, but it's on a 2-minute cooldown, so a lot of your kills will be in the 2-minute window. However, you can do the rest of your rotation on a 1-minute cooldown window because Soul Rot is 1 minute, Phantom Singularity is 45 seconds, but you usually will want to hold it and do that with the Soul Rot as well. So to bring it all together, this is your opener. Jinx, 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 3 targets, get your dots rolling, Haunt, Shadow Bolt, UA, Soul Rot, Phantom Singularity, Dark Glare, dump all your shards, dump all your Nightfall procs, do a ton of damage. That's a huge window. You would do the same thing at the 1-minute mark, just minus the Dark Glare. And that's pretty much it. That's your damage rotation, that's your opener, that's your standard rotation, and that's your burst. If you manage to cast all of that stuff in an arena, you're going to get a lot of kills, you're going to get a lot of rating. But I do want to touch a little bit on playstyle because Affliction is one of the harder classes to play, and I think it's because of several reasons. The first is that there are a lot of buttons. I mean, what we just discussed, it sounds pretty simple just to talk it over, but when you're actually in an arena and you're casting something every single global cooldown, you're spamming your keys, you're doing a lot of stuff, very fast paced, very hard to manage all of your dots, all of your cooldowns, so it's not the easiest thing to learn. However, once you master it, it's a lot of fun, very dynamic playstyle. You have a ton of kill pressure in your 1 and 2 minute windows. It's also challenging to play Warlock because you get targeted a lot with a lot of crowd control, and also you're the damage and kill target for a lot of teams. A lot of melee hunters, they love to chase after you, so you will have to learn to deal with that pressure. Try and get precognition procs as much as you can, still try and apply damage, especially with your instant cast jinxes. Again, it's not the easiest thing to learn. And it can be kind of frustrating sometimes when you enter a lobby and you see 3 melee and you know they're just going to be chasing after you the entire game, but it's really rewarding. If you learn to beat them and you outplay them, you know that you've outplayed them, you know that you deserve those wins. To that end, do check out this replay with commentary that I provided. It's an Affliction lobby, 2500 rating against triple melee. It'll show you how I think about the game and how I deal with the pressure that you will deal with as an Affliction lock. Final note I want to say is that Affliction is really for those who want to be on the offense, doing a ton of damage, topping the damage meter. Really fun playstyle, but also requires you to play very aggressively. So I don't think it works too well if you have a very naturally defensive mindset or reactive mindset. Affliction is for attackers. Okay, I think that's everything. Hopefully that's enough to get you started in your Blitz, Solo Shuffle, Arena games. I hope to see you in queue, and I hope to see you on my stream. If you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to ask away, twitch.tv/smellystinky. Happy to answer any questions, happy to help you out. And check out my other videos on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/@smellystinky. Lots of good stuff for Warlocks in general, lots of PvP resources. Hope to see you in the queues, hope to see you in arenas. See you all soon. Peace.